If you wanted to destroy a $250 billion tech empire, you'd probably need an army of competitors, a recession, and a lot of luck. However, Nokia managed to do it with none of those things. It killed itself. In 2007, Nokia made nearly half of every mobile phone on Earth. 6 years later, it sold its phone business for around $7 billion, less than a tenth of what it had once been worth. In this video, we're unraveling exactly how a company with 84,000 engineers, touchscreen prototypes already on their own desks, and a brand name in every language on the planet walked itself off a cliff. We'll cover the secret weapon Nokia had against the iPhone, the burning oil platform memo that should have saved them, and the one cultural disease that quietly killed every shot they had at survival. Before the iPhone, Nokia wasn't really a company. It was a habit. The little Finnish brand from a town named after a river had quietly conquered the entire planet. By the mid-2000s, Nokia made roughly 40% of all mobile phones sold globally. The 3310 was indestructible. The N95 was a pocket computer years before that phrase existed. And here is the part nobody wants to remember. Inside Nokia's offices in Espoo, engineers were already building prototypes of touchscreen phones. They were sketching out a mobile app store. They had the future on their desks. Outside the building, management could not see it. On January 9, 2007, Steve Jobs walked onto a stage in San Francisco and held up a thin slab of glass. No keyboard, no stylus, just a screen, your finger, and an idea. The iPhone wasn't a better Nokia, it was a different species. And while the rest of the world was gasping, Nokia's leadership called it a niche product, a toy for rich Americans. They believed their scale, their distribution, their brand would protect them. Sure enough, scale, distribution, and brand are exactly what get you killed when the rules change. But here is where the story gets painful. Nokia engineers had touchscreens. Nokia had a real operating system project. They had every ingredient they needed to answer the iPhone, except one, the will to admit they needed to. Internally, Nokia's software was a tangled mess called Symbian. It was built for buttons, not fingers. Patching it for the new world was slow, painful, and political. Different divisions fought over priorities. Promising projects got buried in committees. And then it gets worse. Engineers later described a culture of fear where bad news traveling up to senior managers was career suicide. So the bad news never went up. And the people at the top kept making decisions based on a reality that no longer existed. While Nokia argued with itself, Apple shipped. Google released Android for free to anyone who wanted to build a smartphone. Samsung, HTC, LG, all of them grabbed Android with both hands. In just 2 years, the entire industry standardized on touchscreens, apps, and ecosystems. Nokia was still trying to figure out which version of Symbian to ship next quarter. By 2010, the math was brutal. Nokia's smartphone market share had collapsed from over 40% to under 30%. A new CEO, Stephen Elop, arrived from Microsoft. In early 2011, he wrote what became the most famous internal memo in tech history. He compared Nokia to a man standing on a burning oil platform where the only way to survive was to jump into freezing water. So in 2011, Nokia made the biggest bet in its history. It killed Symbian, and it tied its entire future to Microsoft's Windows Phone. But here is where it gets even worse. The bet failed. Windows Phone never reached even 5% of the global market. Developers wouldn't build for it because users weren't there. Users wouldn't switch to it because the apps weren't there. The classic two-sided trap. Meanwhile, Nokia's own engineers were leaving for Apple, Google, and the exact startups they had once dismissed. In September of 2013, Microsoft bought Nokia's phone business for around $7 billion. The company that had once made nearly half the world's phones was, for all practical purposes, finished as a consumer brand. 2 years later, Microsoft wrote off most of that purchase as a loss. The Nokia name slowly faded from store shelves, eventually licensed out to other manufacturers. A ghost of itself. So what actually killed Nokia? It wasn't the iPhone, it wasn't Android, it wasn't even Symbian. The iPhone was just the trigger. The real cause was something older and quieter and far more dangerous. Researchers from INSEAD and Aalto University interviewed dozens of former Nokia executives. And they found one consistent theme: a culture of fear. Middle managers afraid to deliver bad news upward. Senior leaders making demands disconnected from reality. Engineers told to hit impossible deadlines, who then told their bosses everything was fine. For years, the people in charge of Nokia were the last to know how bad things actually were. That's the cruel paradox of every giant company. The bigger you get, the more layers stand between the truth and the room where decisions are made. Nokia didn't lose because it lacked talent or technology. It lost because the truth could not reach the top floor. And here is the lesson, the one that matters even if you never run a phone company. Every business, every team, even every person you'll ever work with, faces the same choice. You can build a system where bad news is welcome and acted on quickly, or you can build a system where bad news is hidden until it explodes. There is no third option. The companies that survive disruption are not the ones with the best products. They are the ones where the truth can travel upward, fast, without anyone getting punished for telling it. Nokia had everything: $250 billion in value, brilliant engineers, a brand that meant something in every language on earth, but it could not hear itself think. And in business, when you stop listening to your own people, the market eventually stops listening to you. If this story changed how you see comfortable, dominant businesses, subscribe. Because every week we unravel the deals, the empires, and the collapses that quietly shape the money world you live in. Next, watch how Kodak, the company that literally invented the digital camera in their own laboratory, then refused to sell it